Alright, so for this video, for the final exam review, I'm doing graphing sine and cosine, this sheet. I'm not going to do them all. I'm going to assume that you've already checked your notes on the basic 5 points that we need for sine, the 5 points that we need for cosine, and we'll go over how to find these 4 valuable pieces of information. So the first one that I would like to do is 2 cosine of x. 2 is our a value, so that's our amplitude. The vertical shift, even though you can't really see it, there is a +0 there because we don't need to write +0. The period is always 2 pi over b, and the b, the coefficient in front of the input, is 1. So that's 2 pi over 1, which is 2 pi. And then our phase shift, even though you can't see it, there's a +0 inside this input, is c over b. Well, that would be 0 over 1, which is 0. Cool. So let's draw our vertical shift. I'm going to do it via highlighter like we did in, our vertical shift is at 0, so this is where our midline is, right at 0. I wish it was even thinner than that. Let me zoom out. And then from there, I'm going to add my points. So I'm going to start at 0, and for cosine, I'm going to start with a peak. So I go up my amplitude of 2. That's how far my peak is from my midline. Now my period, it tells me not where I end, but how far from my starting point will I end. So if I start at 0 and I add 2 pi, I will actually end up ending my first period at 2 pi. So let me add our ending point, which is a peak for cosine right there. Directly in between these 2 peaks at pi is a trough. So from our midline, I'm going to go down 1, 2, and I will have my trough. Directly in between a peak and a trough at pi over 2 is a midline crossing. And then I'll have another midline crossing there. Connect these dots, be smooth, make a sinusoid, don't make it pointy. There is our first period. In blue, I'll extend it out. So if we start at 2 pi here, we go 2 pi later, which is our period, and at 4 pi, we will have our next ending point. Directly in between those at 3 pi is our trough. Directly in between these two at 5 pi over 2, midline crossing, 7 pi over 2, midline crossing. We could extend it up. And then if we keep the pattern going, we'll see at pi, negative pi, we'll have our trough, and we can keep the pattern moving. Great. Let's do this one. Our a value is 2, so our amplitude will be 2. Our vertical shift, d, is 2. Our period, well, there's a 1 in front, so 2 pi over 1 is equal to 2 pi again. Our phase shift, well, we don't have a plus c in there, it's 0, so that'll be 0 over the 1. That's going to be a starting point of 0. So for this one, I'll just draw my midline as blue. So at 2, I have my dotted midline. It should be dotted because it's not actually part of the graph. It's just a reference line that we use to help us graph. And we're going to start at 0 because that's where our starting point is. So at 0 for sine, we start with a midline crossing. So we put a dot on our midline. Our period of 2 pi will take us all the way over here to 2 pi. 0 plus 2 pi is 2 pi. And for sine, we end with the midline crossing. Directly in between those first two, the first and last midline crossing, is another midline crossing. Directly in between those first 2 midline crossings at pi over 2 is our peak. So we go a distance of 2, because that's our amplitude. 1, 2, we have our peak. And directly between these two, at 3 pi over 2, we have our trough, which from our midline we go down to the distance of our amplitude. And this is the first period. We can extend it out. I'll extend it out using blue. I'll just go a period later and then find all my halfway points to help me graph. Yep, there we go. All right, so for this one, our amplitude is 4. Our vertical shift is -1. Haha, our period is going to be different this time. It's going to be 2 pi over b. Our b value here is 2. The 2's cancel out, so we get a period of pi. Our phase shift, you could still see that this is not inside the parentheses, so it'll be 0 over b in this case, which is 2, which is still just 0. Our starting point is 0. All right, so let's draw our midline at -1. Again, it's dotted because it's just a reference line. For sine, we go to our starting point, and at 0, we have a midline crossing. And then we go a period away from our starting point. So if our period is pi, we're going to end at pi. We have a midline crossing. Directly between these two midline crossings, the first and the last one, is another midline crossing. So you can kind of see it got shrunk up a little bit. Directly in between these first two midline crossings is our peak, and in this case, our amplitude is 4, so from our midline we go up 1, 2, 3, 4. And then directly in between our last two midline crossings is our trough, so from our midline we go down 1, 2, 3, 4, which is the distance of our amplitude. So this is the first period. And we have all this beautiful graph provided to us, so of course we're going to extend it out. So forgive my silence, but we're just following the same pattern. We go a distance of pi, cut it in half, another midline, cut that in half, that's where our peak is, and between these two is our trough. Make it nice and curvy. Distance of pi away, directly in half is another midline, directly in between those two is our peak, and in between these two is our trough. Let's work backwards. Distance of pi, directly in between is a midline crossing, in between these two is a peak, in between these two is our trough. Just notice that all the peaks are aligned, all the troughs are aligned, and all the spacing is even. There's not any section of this that's more squished in than any other section. All right, I do want to do 2 more because these are pretty peculiar. This has everything in it. For this one, our amplitude is 2, vertical shift -3. Our period is going to be 2 pi over pi over 4. And remember, when we are dividing fractions, we keep the top, we change that to multiply, and we flip the bottom fraction. So notice how the pi's will cancel out. 2 times 4 is 8. Not 8 pi, 8. That's why the scaling is different. And then our phase shift. So it's going to be C, which we don't include this negative. If it was plus, C would be negative. But it's going to be pi over 2 divided by B, which is pi over 4. We keep, we change, and then we flip. The pi's cancel out. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So this has everything. So let's draw our midline at -3. All right, we're going to start at 2. So we go to an input of 2, and our amplitude is 2. So since we're working with cosine, we do a peak first. So from our midline, we go up 2 for our peak. And then let's go to our ending point. Our period is 8. So 8 away from our starting point will take us to 10, and we'll have another peak. Since it's cosine, we end with a peak. Directly in between those two, which would be at 6, we have our trough. So from our midline, we go down our amplitude of 2. Directly in between these two, we have our midline crossing at 4. Directly in between these two, we have our midline crossing at 4. Connect the dots. This is our first period. Yeah, it's all whole numbers. That's okay. So we could see that every 2 we have something happening, every 2 we have something happening, or every 4 we have a difference between our peak to our trough, and every 8 we have a distance of our period from peak to peak or trough to trough or whatever. So let's just backtrack and fill out the rest of the graph. So every 2 we have our next point. And that's all we can graph on this side. Every 2, every 2, every 2, that's all we can graph on this side. Yeah, notice how, even though we're outside the first period, from trough to trough is still a distance of 8. From a midline going up to a midline going up is a distance of 8. All right, so for this last one, let me zoom all the way down. Our amplitude is 4, vertical shift, -1. Our period is 2 pi over b, which is not x over 4, not pi over 4. There's a little hidden 1 there over 1/4. Which once we do our fraction math, I'm not going to write it out, keep, change, flip, we end up getting 8 pi. The pi's don't cancel out. So it's 8 pi is our period. Our phase shift is going to be c, which again, based off our standard equation, c is positive. So pi over 2 divided by our b, which is 1/4. So that ends up getting, fraction math, 2 pi is our starting point. So this one's actually going to look very, very similar to the previous one. All right, so we have our midline at -1. We got our starting point at 2 pi, so we go to 2 pi, and for sine, we start with the midline crossing. We go our distance of our period later for our ending point. So if we start at 2 pi, our period is 8 pi, we're going to end at 10 pi. Directly in between at 6 pi, we have another midline crossing. Directly in between those first two, we have our peak, which from our midline, we go our amplitude of 1, 2, 3, 4. And in between these two, we have our trough. We go our distance from our midline of 1, 2, 3, 4. And this, in maroon, is our first period. We're just going to continue the pattern. We can't go a full period, but every 2 pi is something going on. So we're going to have a peak right there. We'll have a midline crossing right there. We'll have a trough right there. Trough, midline, peak. And there we go. Let me know if you have any questions.